Okay, let's get on with it. We're a little late, aren't we? That's we'll blame Omar. He's not well. Okay, today I'm just going to give you a bit of information. It's Christmas coming up soon, and CG Cookie are doing some gift cards. So if you're looking for a CG Cookie subscription and your parents or loved one has asked you what you want for Christmas, we do a CG Cookie gift card this month. You can get it at cgcookie.com/gift-cards, or you can go to the website and right at the bottom of the page there'll be a gift card link that'll take you to the page to buy the gift cards. So give your parents or loved one a little kick to say you want a CG Cookie subscription for Christmas. The gift cards are a trial at the moment for this month, but hopefully if everything goes well and there's no problems, they will stay around forever. So birthdays, Valentine's, anything, perfect gift for someone that loves CG. So cgcookie.com/gift-cards is where to go. Okay, and next, Spiky, you want to show us your demo?
Do I kick it off? Okay.
Yeah, if we have questions, we'll be watching in the chat. So
yeah, I don't have that open, so and when I'm sharing the screen, I can't see it anyway. So you'll have to.
Yeah, we got the chat open. We're keeping an eye on questions that come in.
Yeah, you can interrupt me if questions come that are relevant or something. I will see that I get Blender. Let me. How do I do this? This is something. Share your screen. Blender. This one. Okay. Is that okay? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody there?
If those of you who are in the stream, just click on the little screen share to watch, and you should be able to see Spiky's screen.
So I'm just going to show here is the light path node, and I'm going to discuss this because a lot of people have fear from the light path node, don't know what it's doing. Awful lot of possibilities here, and what does it all mean? So I'm going to discuss that in order. There's actually two categories. The is camera ray, is this ray. Those are the output values 0 or 1. So if something is a camera ray, it outputs a 1, and if it's not a camera ray, it gets a 0. The bottom ones are ray length, that can be any value, non-negative, and it is the length a ray has in Blender units, I think. Ray depth. I will discuss them later on. They're actually, the bottom is pretty easy to explain. But now, let's start. I think here, light. Okay, this is a scene. I have a mirror plane, which has just a glossy with 0 roughness on it. Then I have some monkeys, a diffuse monkey. Let's hide the glass plate for a second. This is a glossy, 0 roughness, glass, emission, subsurface scattering, and the volume. There are others, but I will just keep it at this. You get an idea of how this works. I put a glass plate in front of it, and this is all without any light path node. Now I'm going to show the light path node. We start with the first one, the is camera ray. In cycles, the rays go from the camera towards the light, and not the other way around. This is in ray tracing engines normal. Not all of them do it, but some go in both directions. But cycles goes from camera towards the light. And when it leaves the camera, it's called a camera ray. So that's easy. But as soon as the camera ray hits a surface or a volume, it changes and it becomes something else. If it hits a diffuse surface, it becomes a diffuse ray. If it hits a glossy surface, it becomes a glossy ray. If it hits a glass surface, it becomes either a glossy ray or a transmission ray, because that's both possible, and so on and so on. So let's see. I hope you can imagine what is happening when I turn on this camera ray. Boom, the monkeys are gone. At least some of them, they're still there, but you can't see them, they're hiding behind glass. I have now the light bulb mode. Is camera ray. So if it is a camera ray, it gets glossy, it stays glossy, but if not, it's transparent. So this node, it doesn't get the monkeys reflected, because what the camera sees, it hits the surface and it's glossy, but after that it's no longer glossy. So the other rays don't get anything, it's just the glossy. The world is still reflected because the world, I have it here. I don't have a light path mode on it because it's muted. I can turn the thing on in the world, and now you can see the camera sees the world, but the reflections are the second slot in this case. Okay, and the monkeys here, you can't see them through the camera because the camera hits this and then the glass plate, and then it changes to glossy or transmission ray. And what hits the monkey is a transmission ray, so the monkey can't be seen because it's not a camera ray. Let's hide this from it. You can see also this monkey is a glossy monkey, right? But it only reflects the world, because the world, like I said, doesn't have camera ray active. So it only reflects, it doesn't reflect the green monkey or anything else, or the glass plate. And if you remember what it was like, let's remove the window here as well. You can see that the green monkey is reflected here and here. So this monkey here looks different. It's just glossy. It gets reflects everything in around him or her. It's a female monkey. But here it only can reflect the environment. The others are actually the same. Nothing is being mirrored in the mirror because it's no longer a camera ray. The next in line is the shadow ray, and I'm going to skip that for now because it's a bit different than the others. And then we get the next one, a diffuse ray. I set the mirror a bit different this time. If it is a diffuse ray, it gets a red emission shader, but otherwise it's a glossy shader. This one. So here's a diffuse shader, and this is subsurface scattering shader, but it's also diffuse because the lights can go in any direction. Actually, a diffuse shader is actually a subsurface scattering shader, but with almost zero depth. So the ray goes in and comes out immediately, but in a random direction. And with subsurface scattering, it travels a bit further into the material and then gets bounced out in some kind of direction. But it can be in any direction. That's why it's called diffuse. It's also a diffuse ray. It's diffused, and not this because it's a diffuse shader. It's a subsurface scattering shader, but still. I see I missed the light path mode on this one, but it doesn't matter actually here. actually quite simple. The next one is a glossy shader. The thing is glossy, and here, because this is a glossy shader, here it gets the reflection, it's a glossy ray. So it's glossy from the camera here and then here, because it's still a glossy ray then. And watch, the roughness is set to 0. That's important later on. The glass shader has a transmission component, but it also has a glossy component. It's not only glossy, but it has a glossy component, so you can see part here gets the emission shader. I think I'm picking the wrong shading here, but well, yeah. Ah, okay, yeah, no, that's correct. Only the mirror gets this light path node, the other ones stay the same. Just have the normal shader. But because the glass shader gets the glossy ray, if it is a glossy ray here, and it is this, it's still a glossy ray. So it gets the emission shader. In the next one, where are we? Glossy, singular. This is a weird one. It's a singular ray, and it looks exactly the same as the glossy. And a singular ray, it means that the ray can only go in one direction. And if you have a glossy shader with 0 roughness, that means that the incoming ray and the outgoing ray are, it's like only one ray. Can only go in one direction because it's a mirror-like reflection, pure mirror-like reflection. And then it's called a singular ray. But if I take this monkey and I increase the roughness, you can see it's no longer a singular ray. Here it's still a singular ray because I didn't increase the roughness here. But here it's gone. And if we go back, let me see the glossy one. See, it gets roughness, the glossy one, like the other one, but it's still a glossy ray. It's a rough glossy ray, but it's still a glossy ray. So here it does get an emission shader. It's a bit confusing, I guess, but you'll get used to it. If you play around with it a bit, then you'll get used to it. Next one, reflection ray. Same story. Here, the diffuse material is reflecting light, otherwise you wouldn't be able to see it. So the diffuse reflects light, and here we get an emission shader, a red emission shader. This one is a glossy shader, of course, it reflects. Glass shader, again. Part of the glass shader reflects the light, not all of it, so you get a bit of the emission shader. This one doesn't reflect light, it's an emission shader. And the subsurface scattering monkey, she also reflects light in a diffuse manner, but it is a reflection. And the volume doesn't reflect light. So, no emission shader here. And then we get one more, a transmission ray. And let me see, transmission, let me get the window. Through the glass plate, what comes after is, it gets out of this as a transmission ray, so this part of the mirror behind the glass is becoming red and emissive. And this thing is gone. You have the glass shader. Let me unmute this. And that's also transmissive. It's also glossy, but it's also transmissive. So here we get again the infrared emission if it's a transmission ray. So, what we have left is shadow ray for now, which is actually, if you have a diffuse material like this and the camera ray hits it, and then it can go in any direction, 360 degree, half a sphere around that point. It can go in any of these directions with equal possibility, right? And mathematically that would mean that any direction would have a probability of 0. So no light gets reflected and the world crashes. But luckily that's not true. There's not infinitely possibilities. It's quantized. Anyway, because it can go in many directions, it's very unlikely that it actually hits a light. I have a sunlight here, and it's very unlikely that if it gets a point light, it's even worse. Sunlight is okay, but a point light, the chance that it gets to that point light are very dim, very small. So it's very hard to decide the color of that pixel. Now, what Blender does is for every sample it takes, it shoots from that point of the surface directly towards any of the lights. And then it gets information from that light. But if an object is between the point and the light, then the shadow ray gets stopped and it gets cancelled. So if I now say for this sphere, right, I do the is shadow ray, and if it is a shadow ray I make it transparent, then the shadow is gone, because this point, it was blocked by the sphere, by the glass sphere, so it can't reach the light, so no information. And it is not a shadow ray. Well, it is a shadow ray, it's always a shadow ray, but it's what's a bit strange in the naming. They call it a shadow ray, but it's actually, it's always a shadow ray, but it is, if the shadow ray gets cancelled, then it gets a 1. And if it doesn't get cancelled, so if there's no obstruction, it gets a 0. And if there's an obstruction between the point and any of the lights, depending on which light it goes through, that's also a bit random, you get the shadow ray of 1. And here also, same thing. I can just unmute this and the shadow is gone. So practically it just takes care of shadows or removing them. Right. Okay, I'm going.
So is that the same effect as turning off something that receives shadows?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that would be the same. I'm not sure if it's internally the same, but the effect is definitely the same. I wanted here node. Okay, so the top part is done. The ray length, I already said, they calculate how long a ray is. Very simple. And there's one thing, one exception. If it is subsurface scattering, the ray length doesn't work. But on other, if you have a glass monkey, and you can use the ray length to calculate the length between the front and the back of the monkey, so you know the sort of the volume, and you can use that for a fake volume absorption or so, which is sometimes done. But it gives a float. but not negative, of course, because the length cannot be negative, as far as we know. I should look into that, negative length, what that mean. But anyway, ray depth is, if a ray starts, it gets a value, an index of 0. And with every bounce, it increases the ray depth. So, okay, for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see how many bounces there were. Ray depth is the amount of bounces per ray, actually. Diffuse depth is the same, but only for the diffuse rays. So it only counts diffuse rays. And glossy depth, it only counts the glossy rays, and the transparent and translucent are exactly the same. Just they have the ray depth for one specific kind of ray. And that's actually the whole of the light path mode, I think. Questions? Probably. Or everybody is completely flabbergasted. Don, I
See-
can't hear you. What's wrong?
Oh, I had myself muted. Sorry.
Yeah, I was muted as well.
So let's
Everybody was so
maybe we
quiet.
can maybe we can talk about a practical example of the is ray in a scene. When would you find using the is camera ray a beneficial use?
If you have, actually one of the few times I use it is if you have a world in HDRI, it's lighting your scene, but you want a different HDRI or so to see as a background. So you have a different background than the lighting is giving you. And you can change between the two, or you can have a visualization of a beautiful motorbike you made, and it's against a whitish backgrounds with radiance, but you want the light to be from an HDRI. Then you go to world settings and you just mix between the two through the camera ray node. So the camera sees for instance, the grayish background, and the motorbike gets, or the model, whatever it is, gets the lighting from an HDRI. Very practical.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. So I actually had no idea the explanation behind the is camera ray until you shared it. So this is perfect.
Yeah, it was. There was a question in the forum from someone, and he thought is camera ray is everything the camera sees, which in a way is true, but he had an interior and the window, and then he used his camera ray, but then the background didn't work because the background was not. He thought the camera can see it, but the camera couldn't see it because the window was in front.
Yeah, so this is like a prime
with the
example.
monkey behind the glass, it couldn't see the background.
You guys see my screen?
Wait a second. Let's go live.
Yeah, we got you.
Yep.
Okay. So I found this on a tutorial, and they didn't really explain much. It may have been a CG Cookie tutorial, I forget. But they basically said if you want to be able to grab like information from your HDRI, but then use other information for your world shading color. So when I go to rendered view, like I want to be able to change the color of my background as much as I want, but I don't necessarily want to change my objects and how the lighting affects them, because if I were just to use this background shader, let's mute this node, or we'll just we'll use this as the preview. So look how much the world lighting, all I'm doing is really just grabbing this color and I'm multiplying it with the wave texture so I get a little bit of a gradient in my world. But the main color driver is this RGB node, and as I drive this around, notice how it's affecting everything in my scene when I'm in rendered view.
Yeah.
And if I were to want like a blue background, maybe like a nice sunny, maybe something like that. A little bit of blue tone. Everything else tones with blue, and that can be really offsetting to your scene.
Yeah.
Which is exactly why this light path node becomes so valuable. Because what you can do basically is I can instead use information from an HDRI. So this would be an HDRI's background that provides lighting to the scene. But now I have this really ugly HDRI everywhere I look, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm looking through my camera, I have to like block out the world in order to not see it. But if I wanted to be able to just have a background that was blank, you can use that is camera array with a mix shader. And the is camera array is basically the factor. So everything that the camera can see, it's going to pull the city EXR. And so we'll send this through now and unmute it. And now I get the benefit of the effects. Let me put the HDRI in real quick rather than a white shader. So now like the windows and things have the effect off of the HDRI, but the world around is still coming from the shader below. So I can change the background without affecting my buildings now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's exactly what I was talking about here. But it's like if they yeah, I hear that often in tutorials. They say like camera array is everything the camera can see, but that can be a bit confusing.
Yeah, so I mean the concept of cameras is kind of unique too, right? So I can duplicate this camera and now I've got two cameras, but I also have, I mean what I'm looking through is technically a viewport camera, right?
Viewport is considered camera in the light buff node.
That's
So
right.
this camera array works also in the viewport.
That's why I can see through my viewport window and still see the same effects as if I was looking through a camera.
Yeah.
So if I can go into camera view, I need to change this to camera. So maybe this is just a little tutorial. I have two cameras in my scene. How do I look through this one instead of this one? And all you have to do is go over to your scene properties and you've got a camera object that you can select a different camera to look through. And I believe it gives that triangle a solid fill when it's the selected camera.
Yeah, that's the active camera.
That's the active scenes camera.
And I think there should be probably if you have 5 cameras, there should be a way to easily make one active, but I'm not sure that, I believe there should be a way instead of going through the scene.
Yeah, you would do that through the animation editor typically. You would put markers on here. So I would come.
Can't you just switch in the 3D view between cameras, making one be
Oh,
active?
let's see.
I think that should be possible.
That's a good question. I don't know. Adrian, do you know the answer to that? Or Omar?
I rarely use actually more than one camera, but I think that should be.
So typically what I do is I just add a marker and then I assign the camera to the marker.
I think Omar did something about that before, didn't he?
Yeah.
I can't remember. There was a shortcut. Bind camera to marker or something.
Yeah, so if I do it through the animation editor, if you look here through my viewport, I'm doing it in the animation editor on a frame. And that's how you can quickly change between cameras, is you just put them on a marker and then you bind the camera to the marker. You just have to have the camera selected when you're over your marker. But if you wanted to manually change it, you can always do it from the scene settings as well. Maybe Omar has an easier way in the viewport. But if I wanted to tie my viewport to the camera as well, I can hit 0 on my numpad, or you can click on this little camera icon. And I'm looking through the camera. You can go to your end panel and under view, you can turn on camera to view, and now everywhere where I view, I'm actually looking through the camera. And that is light path, or is camera array node is still working the same way.
If you go
because the camera is the same thing as a viewport.
If you go in your where you are now in the view, there's a local camera. If you check that, then you can switch cameras and make another one active.
Yeah, you can actually set anything as the local camera, right? So if I wanted to go to my Bezier curve.
But You can also switch cameras with that one.
Yep, you can. So that would be the way to do it. You can do it through the local camera option. The local camera will let you do it through any object, really.
Yeah. And that can be confusing
Good
if
call.
you set it to the default cube. And then what's happening?
Yeah, so I'm looking at my character on the bench here, right? And I've got one camera facing one direction and one camera facing another direction. You can quickly toggle between the two cameras.
Yeah.
And the camera to view is moving your camera around. So just be aware. I mean, I'm coming in and I don't know if you can see the camera object in rendered mode. But I'm totally, I'll get out of camera view. Just click this here. I've moved my camera way over here now because it was tied to the view. So as soon as you go into the view and you start moving around behind the buildings, and if I leave camera view, now my camera's way over there. So just be aware, this is very destructive for your camera's location.
It's super handy, but when you forget it, forget to
Yeah.
toggle it off, then it can destroy everything. Or
There's a really cool shortcut that I like to use sometimes instead of doing this camera to view. And it works when you have a numpad. You have to change it if you don't have a numpad. You just go into the Blender shortcuts and change the key map. But rather than doing camera to view, you can just set up your viewport the way you like something to look. So, you know, I really want my camera to look through my eyes right now. You can hit Control Alt and numpad 0, and it moves the camera exactly to that location. You may have to do a little bit of tweaking with the G key, but the camera has now moved its location to match where your viewport's looking through. That's a really handy feature. I use that a lot more than I use camera to view. I'll toggle them back and forth, but if I forget this one's on, then I totally destroy the way I had my camera look.
There's also a nice Blender add-on where you can save point of views for camera.
That's
views,
right.
so whether
Yes.
it's camera or not. I can
Bookmark view it was made by Wayne Dixon.
Forward
There's a
views.
new one that just came on the Blender market as well. Save views, I think, is what it's called.
Forward views comes with Blender.
Let's go to add-ons. Just type in view. Stored views.
Yeah. It's really handy.
That's going to be in the view tab, right? Yeah, under view, and then you have stored views, and you can initialize stored views.
And you can set it to a camera or just...
Hey, there's your camera selector. That's the easy swapping between your cameras.
Yeah, if you have that one, that's also, yeah. Didn't think of that.
Okay, I'm gonna get into the question about the curves because I know how to answer that one quickly. I don't have a quick answer for the glass shader in Eevee. Adrian or Spiky, maybe, if you guys have time.
That's there's quite a few settings to go through in there. You've got to turn on certain things and make adjustments to be able to use the glass in Eevee.
Yeah, I assume that Dybot was asking because of the transmissibility of glass in Eevee is not as user-friendly as it is in Cycles.
Yeah, glass is a difficult one in Eevee. I think it might be best to.
Eevee
We're,
glass
we're,
shader, right?
sorry.
Lampel has a great Eevee glass shader, and he also discusses how he made that one in one of his tutorials. Of course.
Yeah, that might be one we can look at for next month. We'll come up with a demo for that. If you want to check in with us next month, or maybe we can put something on in the chat somewhere to help.
About next month already. Can we put that on the second week of January?
Yeah, I was going to say that actually.
Because I think
For next month.
it's first or something on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's not going to be ideal, is it?
No, for me, I can't do it then.
No, we'll do it the following Saturday for next month. Is that all right with you, Theobald? Are you all right with waiting for next month, or do you want us? I can look at something during the week and post it for you if you like.
Well, the second Saturday is good for me, but I'm not at home until the 5th of January. when I don't have access to Blender or anything. So I can't really do a stream before then.
So next month we'll probably be looking at the 7th of January.
Okay.
Good.
Well, I can cover the question really quick about arrayed items.
Yeah, I think Theobald's typing, so I'll see what he says.
So I like using the chain link is a good example of using an arrayed item, and it covers a couple of modifiers and a couple of like pros and cons related to using arrays and curves. We'll first start with, I've just got this chain link, so I'm going to turn these off. It's just a single torus that I've added into my scene. So if I go to Shift A, add menu, and then I'm adding in a torus primitive, it's this giant object. And I can go into edit mode and scale it down really small. I'm not going to go too small where I can't see it. All you have to do is go Alt-Z and just grab everything below the half section, G and Y, and you've got yourself a chain link. It's that simple. And then you just need to scale it back down. So I've added that really quick while Spiky was talking. And then I just added in a modifier. You go over to the generate modifiers. And if you're fairly new with modifiers, they group them by what they do. So generative modifiers create things, typically, or they generate geometry. And deform modifiers deform the geometry. They make it warp and twist and bend. So, and then these typically have to do with how the object data is displayed, and then physics obviously is how the object interacts with the real world, or simulating a real world. So an array modifier is going to duplicate your object along some location or axes. So if I turn the array modifier on, and we'll just we'll start all the way over. So add modifier and array. And by default, it sets itself to relative offset with a factor of 1, which means the object's x dimensions, it will get all the way past by one full object's dimension over. So if I did this by 1.1, it gives it a little bit of a gap. If you go less than 1, then you start overlapping. You can also do a constant offset, which is just a distance. So 1 meter versus less than a meter. And you can change the units over in your unit setting. But you can increase the count of your array, so it's generating more and more of these. But what's nice is because it's a modifier, obviously when you turn it off and on, you're only dealing, when I go into edit mode, I'm only dealing with this one. So I don't have to go in every single one of these and modify them. Now, I can change the axis instead. So let's say I didn't want to go in the X, I can set that to 0. And just be aware, if you have both of these on, you'll be affecting them both. So typically only choose one, relative or constant. But I can choose to go in the Y dimension instead. And you can go 1 positive or 1 negative. And the same goes with Z. I could choose to go Z instead. Now, if you do more than 1, you start making stair steps in whatever the 2 directions you're going. And if you do all 3, then you're going to be doing stepping in all the directions. So that's just a quick rundown of the array modifier. Now I want this to be arrayed along the y-axis. So I'm going to set those there. And typically chain links just have a little bit of overlap. So I'm going to pull this factor back just a touch until they cross each other. And they don't exactly look like a chain link, so what I typically do is I just grab an empty and add it in at the same location. So I set my 3D cursor to where my object's origin is with Shift S, cursor to selected. And then I go to my add menu, Shift A, and add in an empty object. It doesn't matter which one you add, I typically add the arrows or plane axis. And then I'm going to clear the rotation. It's going to come in and it'll probably be really big, so you can always scale it down just a touch by going over to the empty data. and changing the size. Otherwise, it's like super huge and you can't see the axes. Now, the reason why I'm adding the empty in is on the array settings, you can do an object offset as well. So I can turn both of these on, and I can pick the empty as my object offset. And when I rotate the empty, notice how it can deform how that's being arrayed. So that's rotating along the x-axis or along the y-axis. And that's what I want to get. Now we're getting more of a chain link effect. So 90 degrees will get it to typically do what you want. So I just set it to rotate 90. And now we got a good chain link going in one direction. But if I want it to go along a curve, I can have the fit type, instead of going to a count, you can change it to be fitting to a length. So I could have it, you know, fit some distance, or I can have it fit a curve. And I made a quick curve here that goes from here over to here. And so you can drop and grab that curve, and it's still going along the y-axis, and it's got an object offset, so it's rotating 90 every time it does one. But notice how it's not deforming along the curve, it's just going the same length as the curve. So the next thing you need to do is you need to add a curve modifier. And this causes deformation. So you do it after you array. We want to get the length of the curve. So if I were to change this curve's length, I can come in here and notice how my array is changing as I'm moving my curve around, longer versus shorter. Now you just color pick, or I drop that curve there, and you're going to get a really weird effect. Looks like it's not doing what it's supposed to be, but look how much it's deforming the geometry. And its deform axis right now is deforming along the x-axis, so I just want to make it go along the same axis I'm arraying, so the y-axis. And in this case, it's going the opposite direction, so I'll go to negative y. Now we got a nice little chain link that goes between those. And now I can select that curve, Bezier curve. Let me just search for it in our outliner. Right there, that guy. So now when I go into edit mode, the chain link is always tied to where the curve is. Now this can become a little bit problematic. So let's say I were to subdivide this a few times. And I scale this one out quite a bit. Notice how at my chain link sections here, like I've got some really bad deformations. That's probably the initial question that was being asked. How do I array something along a curve without this happening? And by nature, the curve modifier, it's a deformation modifier, so it's going to deform the geometry. The more smooth of transitions you have along your curve, the less it deforms. But there's a couple things you can do. Geometry nodes can solve this. I don't know well enough to teach it on the fly, but you can totally do a similar effect where you instance on points along a curve. But you can also do parenting instead. So rather than setting all these modifiers to my chain link, I can actually set them to a plane. So I can grab my chain link, shift click and select my plane. And I just want to make sure that my curve object is the active object. So for me, mine is green when it's active. And then I'm going to Control L, and I'm just going to copy the modifiers. So now my plane has all the same modifiers my curve, my chain link piece does. And I can clear these modifiers off of my chain link piece now. And what I can do is I can parent, make this the child and this the parent, so that these planes are deforming and they're getting all messed up around the type ends, but the chain links won't be deformed because they'll become children. And we do that via instancing. So select your chain link as the child, the plane as the parent, and Control P to parent the object. And you don't see anything happen right now, but you will when you click on the plane. You can go to the object properties under visibility instancing. We can instance every child on either vertices or on faces. If I do vertices, it does everywhere where a vertex is on our plane. So when I go into edit mode, there are 4 vertices, so it'll put a chain link on each one. Or I can choose faces, and it puts a chain link at the center of the face instead. So now I've got the chain link going along, but the chain link does not get destroyed along those really tight bends. Now you still have to modify your curve so it looks believable, right? There's no way a chain link should do that. But then you can turn off viewport for the plane and render, so when I were to go into the camera's view, if I had render turned on, I would see those chain links when I hit the render button. But if you turn it off, they'll just show the chain links instead. And now you've got the best of both worlds. You just have to make sure it looks like I have the chain link selected right now, but I really just have the plane selected. And it's all turned off by default. So just remember that, like, I can't select my chain link anymore. Well, it's because it's a child of plane. So you have to come into the plane and come find it, or turn these back on to look at the child object. The child object is just here. But you can do this with archways. You can do it with anything that's getting arrayed that you don't want to deform around a curve. You just want it to be repeated. So hopefully that answers the question. Are there any additional questions regarding that?
I think Nathan was asking, he says, my question was about the deform that you've fixed by changing the axes. It doesn't solve the problem for me.
Ah. So when you change the deform along the axes, probably talking about deformation axes, right? It's tricky to get right.
I think that's in Jonathan Lampel's new course, the geometry nodes. He has that type of problem when you can see it behind me, the roller coaster. He creates that and he shows it's to do with the normal direction on the curve.
Yeah,
and he comes up with go on.
Yeah, you basically want your objects, if you go to the item tab, notice how the rotation of my curve, it's tied to the same X, Y, Z direction as the rotation of my object, the original plane. When I turn off the curve and array modifiers, all these objects are sharing the same rotation coordinates, and they're all pointing in the exact same directions orthogonally. If the curve, if I'd gone into edit mode and completely moved my curve out of orientation, or I had rotated my curve a different way, when you start adding that curve deformation in after that, you get really weird deformation. So even though I have the right axis, my curve has now been rotated. And so if I do Alt-R and I bring it back to where they're all sharing the same X, Y, and Z axes, it won't cause that to happen. So that hopefully, that's probably what ended up happening for you. That can be really tricky to get right. So I typically add my object first, and then I add an empty and I add a curve. I add them all at the same time at the location. And then I just do a very quick array of them to make sure I'm getting them the way I want. And then I go into edit mode on the curve to move my curve around. I don't ever rotate my curve in object mode. Once I've got everything tied to it via modifiers, I don't ever do any of this. I only do it in edit mode, because I've got what I want as far as the effect. Hopefully that makes sense. Is that a little bit better explanation? Because I've had to fight that a lot when working with the curves and using it as a modifier.
I think he's just responding now. If you go into edit mode on your curve and select one handle, that one you've already scaled up would be a good one.
Yeah, this one right here.
I think it's Control T and twist for twist. That's it. Sometimes that can have an effect where the curve is twisted. It's changing the direction of the normal.
Oh yes, for sure. Yep. Yeah, if I turn on my normals here, go up to the viewport overlays, you can turn on the normals for your curve. This shows the twist of the arrow. So if I control T and I start twisting this, you can see the arrows all twisting around. And that can really affect how the array is working on your object as well. You can see how it's deforming those planes a whole bunch.
It's Control T in it.
Yep, it is Control T. It's just
Control
changing
T.
the tilt property on your item. So if you see that you have tilt, and if you select them all with the A key, you get like a mean value for all the tilts. You can reset that back to 0. But you have to, I mean, honestly, you have to go in on each one and set them to 0 in order to fix it.
It says I use a circle curve. Is what you said still true for that? I
Yeah,
believe
so if I want to add a
it'd
circle
be the
curve
same.
in, so I've got my 3D cursor right here, and I add in a curve object, and I'll just add in a circle. And it's a really big circle, so I need to move it down to like 0.01. Or let's do 0.1. Something like that. So I can select my plane object, and instead of going to the other curve, I can set it to this Bezier circle instead. And it will array just fine as long as I haven't rotated that curve. As soon as you start rotating, though, you get all kinds of weird fun effects in object mode. Or if you start Control-T'ing and causing twist. Now the same also goes for radius. If I change the radius on any given point along the curve, it's going to affect everything that's being modified by the curve. This is probably my favorite one to troubleshoot with curves. If you were to scale your curve, it may look okay while it's being scaled, but if you were to apply the scale of the curve, notice how everything just got changed. And I actually reported this as a Blender bug, and they said it was intentional behavior. It was requested by a user, but you've completely modified the geometry on everything, even though it's now set to a scale of 1. You can tell that it's a different size than it was before I applied it. Right? That was before applying. That's after applying. So just be careful. I don't typically do anything in object mode with my curves. I leave them at their default settings. So a scale of 1 and a rotation of 0. Or if you are going to rotate it, like rotate around X 90, then Control A and apply that rotation. Like it should recorrect itself on applying rotation, but when you apply scale, it totally messes the geometry up. So I typically just go into edit mode and change things with my curve in edit mode, because it's a lot more dynamic and interactive, and it's more user friendly and intentional to work with. How's that? Was that good? I probably went a little long. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it says I haven't rotated the curve, only scaled it. I applied the scale and rotation, but it still doesn't fix it. It's so weird and frustrated.
Oh, okay. Well, let's send the blend file to us. You can send it in the chat or DM it if it's a big one, and we can troubleshoot what exactly you're trying to work with. But yeah, typically I'll just add everything at the same location as the 3D cursor, so they're all having the same origin, and then I do my array first, fit to the curve, and then I add the curve as the next modifier, and I typically set it at the axis I want it to go against. It's a little tricky getting it set up, but it's usually just one of the 3 axes. So we can try troubleshooting that a little bit more offline. Stop streaming my screen now. Hopefully that makes sense, though.
Yeah,
If you ended up applying the scale on the curve and it totally destroys your geometry, I just add another curve and start over.
Yeah, start again. It does. If you don't do certain things in the right order as well, it can mess it up.
Yeah,
like you was doing.
You can also convert meshes to curves. So like if you have a certain curve that you want around something, you can steal that geometry by using the convert to menu. It's just up in the header. and you can convert like a series of edges into a curve instead. Then you can array along that. So curves are really handy though. In geometry nodes uses them really well, and the assemble course that's coming out has some really cool uses of it. And I feel like the geometry nodes, I'm finally a convert. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and
I just don't know well enough to teach it, and Jonathan already has. So
yeah,
wait
he
till the
goes
course
through
comes
that
out.
problem. He does have that problem with the roller coaster, where it twists and deforms, and he has to. He does show a fix in it, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but
Yeah,
look out for that and show that and have a look at that course when it comes out. It's going to be a
there's
good
an
one.
extra episode bonus
Yeah.
where he explains it really well. What's happening?
Ooh, adding a new curve has fixed it. Perfect. It was probably because you applied scale on the curve in object mode. You had scaled it in object mode and then applying it, and probably rotation, maybe a bit of both. That's I've had all those headaches with curves. So it took
Who hasn't?
working with a curve for days, just playing around and troubleshooting.
With geometry nodes, you get a lot more control, and it's actually
Yeah.
when you get used to it, it's actually a lot easier. Because honestly, I've had so much problems as well with these curves and. Oh.
Okay, question from Parsec. Do you need to apply a mirror to properly work with shape keys to fix deformation errors for posing? Is that you're talking about the mirror modifier? That's a good question.
So I'm trying
No,
to.
you don't have to.
Do you need to apply a mirror?
You don't need to.
If you've got a mirror modifier on your mesh, you shouldn't need to apply it. No.
But
If that's
can
what
be
you mean.
nice.
Oh, he's talking about with shape keys. Apply a mirror for properly to work with shape keys.
There was a question in the forum on CG Cookie from the Pierrot course by Ken Trammell, and he had that problem with he was using shape keys and mirror modifiers, and it worked perfectly. So it can work, but there's a trick to it.
Sounds like the Piero curse has the answer then. You know which lesson that was, Spiky, off the top of your
No,
head?
but it's not so long ago. If you look in the CG Cookie forum, we should be able to find it. Actually, it's not first or second page or something like that from the last.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing it. To be honest.
And in that lesson, Kent explained it excellent to how to do that with shape keys.
Cool.
Can't remember exactly, but it has to do. You can click the down button and then mirror shape keys and make new shape key for mix and things like that. And, yeah.
That sounds like a good place to go for those answers then.
But I didn't do the Piero course yet. I still have to do that. I'm going to do it once, sometime.
Yeah, the to-do list is ever growing. I'm working
Yeah.
Cubicity right now.
No, but
It's such a good course. It's on my to-do list. I agree.
yeah.
I always looked at that one and I thought I'm not good enough to do that yet, and I've put it off and I put it off, and I think I really need to go and have a look at that again.
There's everything. Animation, rigging,
Yeah.
tilting,
It's a master
everything.
course. That's for sure. All right. Spiky, do you want to share the second thing? Or how we doing on time, Adrian?
We're
okay.
just gone 8 o'clock, so we're just over the hour, so we can keep going a little bit longer.
Yeah. How's everybody feeling? You want to keep going? Spiky's got another thing to share, and if we got a couple more questions, we can try answering a few of them if they're easy. If
Yeah,
not, we'll
yeah.
save them for next time.
I can do my demo now. Before that, I saw Sheila had a question. If you can, with the light path node, if you can take several and combine them, several outputs. And if they're on the top one, top level with the is camera ray and is glossy ray, you just add a math mode and add them together. And clamp the add node, because both, if one of them is 1, then you add them and you get 1. If both of them are 1, you get a 2, but if you clamp that, you still get a 1. And only if both are wrong, both are untrue, then you get a 0. If that's what you want. If you want it the other way around, you multiply them. So if one of them is 0, then the end result is 0. And only if both of them are 1, then you get a 1.
You could combine them in the form of mixed shaders too, right?
Yeah,
Use one for one mixed shader and one for...
That's horribly expensive for nothing.
Okay.
It's just a value, it's 0 or 1, just use a math node.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. It is just it's Boolean math, right? Add the truths together, or
so you have plus adding, that is and, no, that's or, a Boolean or, and multiplying is the Boolean and.
Okay. So you have to have this and this to be true in order for the output to be true.
Yeah, if you multiply, then both must be 1. Both must be true to be 1. True.
That's a good one.
And if you add them, then one of them has to be 1. Because they both can be 1, in certain cases, you just clamp the add node.
Wardred has a great question. That's going to require some time. But I'm going to say that some of that was covered in the off-road course.
Oh, for the wheel rotation.
Yeah, he's trying to animate the rotor blade, but he just couldn't get it to work good, even with motion blur. And so what, if you watch animated movies, Bad Guys is one of my favorite ones that does this. You look at the car tires, and they have a helicopter actually in that movie. And they have the spinning blades on the helicopter. It's a visual illusion that they overlay a texture over of like a spinning swoosh, and then they're just animating that swoosh instead. So they get the blades to turn when the helicopter starts up, but then it transitions into like a grease pencil object, and that's it. So that's one of the, if I were to try to go about doing it, that's how I would try doing it. I would do a slow rotation of the actual object and then convert it into a grease pencil of the swoosh effect. Now with cubicity, I don't know how much of that would be allowed. You probably just get the rotation like Wayne shows in the off-road course, and just get it where it's spinning just fast enough, but you don't have where the motion goes backwards.
I'm just reading through the question. There's another question from Wardred as well, further up, about keeping proportions when I'm moving the middle of a pipe around with making it pinch, or adjusting the shape of a window on a helicopter. It pinches or stretches the black moulding around the window. Is there a good way to force a width of an object? I'm not sure I quite understand what you're trying to do there.
No, me neither. Actually.
So typically my hack for forcing width is making use of a solidify modifier and setting it to even thickness on the modifier. If I'm having any sort of pinching effect when things are going around different angles, that's usually my go-to. But I guess I'd have to see the problem.
Oh, Wardred, just take a curve, man.
Oh yeah, curve. Just use a
take
curve.
A curve and give it a bevel, and you don't have any problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, add a curve, and in the curve data section, it's the little light teal colored section. There's some geometry settings. You can make the curve have actual width like a tube or a pipe.
Because extruding
it's exactly like solidify.
A cylinder by hand, and then and then curving it. It's a horror.
Yeah, definitely.
But you can do both though. I think you can add a curve and then you can solidify as well, so it becomes a tube. Isn't that right?
No, you can't solidify a curve.
You could, I guess you could do it as a Boolean operation, convert them both to mesh and then Boolean, right? Have one that has a smaller diameter than another one, and then the smaller diameter is a Boolean difference. I guess it depends what you're trying to do. Maybe you can show us a picture, Wardred, and we can, maybe that'd be a good one for next time. I would probably just make the curve, and then once I have the right diameter I want, I would convert to mesh and then do a solidify. Then it would outset the wall. You'd have that hollow effect with the same thickness all around the cross section.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. But I don't know exactly what it's trying to do, but it's possible, yeah. I'd start with curves, then definitely.
All right, Spiker, let's go back to you. You got one last thing to share.
Well, for this week, for this month.
That's right, for this month.
I'll try again. Share screen. Where am I? Blender. That's it. Blender. Everybody can see it.
Yeah, we got it.
Just deleted the default cube. So if everybody's there, I'm going to show you something. Maybe I can actually show it here. I made this roof, and it consists of all different size tiles.
Wow.
And if you look along the width of this, they connect. And this is something, and also here they line up on each other. But this is something I used a trick for some time ago when I wanted to make a library. So not just a bookshelf with a few 50 books or so, but an actual library with thousands of books. And these books, they all have different width, but they have to stick together. You can't have gaps or so. So how do we do that? And it's more or less the same trick I used. But I'll just go do it. I'll add a plane first. And now I'm going to move it, but this is absolutely unnecessary. Just like doing it. One. Okay, let's do this in 3D cursor. Minus. Like I said, this is absolutely unnecessary. So I'm going to make the tiles. First, I'm going to subdivide this thing. Subdivide. Let's say 23 times. And now I am going to. I need to be in edge mode, and I select a vertical edge, doesn't matter which one, and then select a similar direction, and then I delete them, but only the edges. So if we now go into vertex mode, you see this. I'm going to now. I'm going to do, I'm selecting the middle, and then I'm going to, where was this? I think it's a mesh transform, randomize, and it randomizes all them. I think this is a bit too much for this size, so let's put this at maybe 007, I don't know, maybe even less. So now they have different width already, but well, they're a bit of a mess, so let's make them straight again. choose individual origins, and then I don't want to touch the Y, so I do S, Shift Y, and then 0. And now let's try it again. I'm going to select all of them, and now I press V, the V key, and enter. If I now press L, you can see they're all split. All the vertices in the center, so they're all loose from each other. And now I can press P and separate by loose parts.
That V key is the rip operator, isn't it?
Yeah, but it works on so many different things at once
Yeah, that's
now.
cool.
You don't even have faces. It just rips the vertices. And now, if I go to Object, Set Origin, and Origin to Geometry, we can see how many objects we have. They're all different objects, but we're going to use the fact that you can do a lot of things on more than one object at the same time. And we are actually almost there. We have already done a lot. I will go into edit mode, select everything, and extrude in the X direction. EX a bit, like this. And now, because I'm in edit mode, you can see these origins of all these tiles are still here at the end. And that's ideal, because if we now go into object mode again, we keep switching, but there's another fun one. Object, transform, randomize transform. And we're going to randomize the scale, but only the X scale, I think. Yep. And this is fun. Let's take this. Maybe we can see a bit better, but you get all of these things. If you want, you can select all of them and scale in the Y direction a little bit. Individual origins, so they give a little bit of distance between them, but they're okay, but they don't have thickness. For the roof, I will actually, if I go back to 3D cursor as a pivot point, I can now do Shift Control Alt S and shear them. And because I want them floating, I can now S Z 0 and we can individually rotate them a bit later on. The thing is, we have a problem. If I go into photo face orientation, it's not even this bad this time, but sometimes it's all over the place. Some are blue, some are red, pointing up, and I want them all with the normal up, so I can use solidify modifier later on. And they all go in the same direction. Now I don't know, maybe someone knows a better trick, but what I came up with, if I go into edit mode, and select everything, and just extrude them somewhat down. And that doesn't work, because we need to apply the scale probably. We scaled to 0. Edit mode. Merge by distance just to be sure. No, that's okay. now it works.
So, Wardard asked a question. Could you not just do recalculate normals before extruding? And I think the answer is it will just
No.
flip everybody's normals once, right?
I have them select, but they're all different objects.
Yeah, because they're different objects, they'll just flip their own
And-
normal.
Well, it's not the problem that they're different objects, but they're planes. So, what is
Just-
inside and what is outside for Blender?
There's no inside and there's no outside. It's just
So
a
the
flat
only
plane.
way- the way Blender decides which way is up and which way is down is by the indices of the planes. So if they're anti-clockwise, the normal is up, and if they're clockwise, the normal is down, or the other way around. I don't know, don't remember. And that's why with things like this, or with retopology, when you just add vertices and extrude and things, then the order can get mixed up and you get a mess. And this is the reason I extrude, is because now I have cubes. Well, not cubes, but now I can calculate the normal. So
Because you have faces pointing in all directions.
and then shift, and now they're all blue. And now I can keep them like that, but I like to add a solidify modifier. So I can go in side view into wireframe, and then just delete the bottom.
So here's a question. Could you use a normal modifier instead? Have them all point to one of the planes as like a data transfer?
I didn't think of that. Probably. Yeah. I'm gonna try that. But yeah, not
I mean, this
now.
is a pretty good solution
That could
too.
work, yeah. That could work.
Yeah, join all into one object, I guess, is another way of doing it. I don't know if that would fix the problem still, though.
If you join them in one object, you still have the same problem.
They're still island planes.
They're still planes, so
Yeah.
that doesn't work. I tried that. I was stupid and tried it. But anyway, back into object mode. We now have the normals correct, so we can delete them and add a solidify modifier. You can see how thick this is, right? Seems about right. It gives it only to one, but that's the active one. Make sure you have an active one. What do you now do? Control L and link. Where are
Copy
we?
modifiers.
Modifiers. Or Control C if you have the copy attributes add-on. Now while we're here, let's look at this. I think choose individual origins and just rotate them. And then 3D cursor and rotate them like this or however we want. And that's actually everything. There's just a few tricks in here that using one operation on a lot of objects. Since we can now go into edit mode on more than one object, that's ideal. You couldn't do that before. And of
That was
course,
new with
something
Blender
like this you
2.8,
can do
wasn't
with
it?
Geometry nodes, but sorry.
That was new with Blender 2.8, I think. That was one of like the major features that everybody was really happy to have, was being able
Yeah.
to go into edit mode with more than one mesh.
Yeah, it's a lifesaver in many situations.
So
Almost.
nice.
Yeah. But there you have it, actually. But you can see how this could work if you, for instance, if you take a line and you can have a row of books from different sizes and then extrude up to get different heights with the randomized transform. things like that, extrude them backwards to give them some depth. And because if you make a library, you usually are not close to books, but there are just a lot of them. And then you can just use, well, they're simple objects, so you have UVs, and yeah, just put a texture on them, or different textures, it's a few colors. It's easy to make. But I wanted to show this demonstration because it has some extras that with the books you don't get. But also a stack of books on the ground. You can use the same thing. Maybe with the randomized transform you also do the Z rotation of the books so they don't too even. A bit more chaos. Well, okay, that's it for me.
That was really good, Swaggy.
Yep, I thought it's fun.
Yeah.
It's few things like you don't think about using V on mesh like that. I mean, I didn't, but it works.
Yeah, that was really interesting. That
It's a simple thing, but
I've had to do things with
spend
books.
hours to post that.
I've had to do things like that with books, like fill in a bookcase full of books, and it's that's actually a really good solution for that. When you want different sized books and things like that, really good, excellent. How are you doing, Sean?
Good. I'm feeling all challenged by Spiky now. I'm wondering if I can quickly generate his solution with a 5-line script. Because Blender comes with a Python module too, and you could make individual objects, select them all, and then just run a little bit of code and randomize the scale on the
Yeah,
objects.
this could be made in an add-on easily. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
You got
Yeah.
my brain spinning. That was awesome. I really like that.
We still need to get Waldridge helicopter blade spinning. We'll have to look into that. I was just having a look at your helicopter as well, Waldridge. I can see what you mean about the windows, around the windows. Some are thin, some parts are thinner than others.
Oh, okay. I don't know. If we have time, Omar actually had a question that I answered this week that was kind of cool. It has to do with the interface. Do we have time? Does everybody want to see this? How to change your checkboxes from squares into circles. Does anybody want to see that?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, hold on. This is actually something I love spending time with in Blender, is if you haven't gone... Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, this is me trying to play while Spiky was talking. I was like, I'm gonna make 5 objects and try to randomize everything. But Omar asked, can you show how to do, so in my interface, all my checkboxes that I've got here are circles. And I've got this nice little rounding around a lot of my edges on things. My viewport has a different view style and everything. So how did I get it to look, Blender to look this way, as opposed to everybody else's Blenders being a little bit more boxy? And so Omar asked one day, how did I do that? And in the edit preferences, you've got lots of options. What I like to do though, this is my Blender workspace. I just duplicate the layout, and then I drag this corner across, and I change the left-hand side to preferences. That way I can see stuff here, and I'm not losing my window. And then I just rename it, double-click on here, and call it pref. But inside of the preferences, if you go to themes, there is a plethora. I don't know any other program that gives you so much access to change everything about how the program looks besides Blender. Like I've never seen so many options. Like just look at all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what's even better is you don't just get to change it. You get, like, once you're done changing it, you can click the plus icon and save it as a new theme. and you can go to your where Blender stores themes, and you can go and grab it. And anytime you update Blender, if you want to load that theme and install it, you can. So, but inside of the user interface, there are all these options here, and they let you decide how round things can be. And Omar, do you remember which one it was? You'd think it would be easy, like you'd think this would be checkbox, but it's not. I guess we'll go from the top. Not toolbar item. So all we're looking for is this circle here. It's not radio buttons. Radio buttons is the ones on the left there, so that changes those. Not text. It's option. So normally it comes, so like maybe just a little bit. I forget what the default value is. What is it for you guys?
Just
I'll have to have a look.
backspace.
So normally it looks something like that though, and I was like, man, those look ugly. So I decided to go up to 1, and I turned them into circles, and it just you can also change your shading on a lot of these things. So how you're shading how they look, if you want them to have like a little bit of a pop to them.
The default on that round list is 0.4.
Okay, 0.4. Yeah, so it's just a little bit of a bevel around the edges. But yeah, I bumped mine all the way up to 1. So when you're done with that though, you can just click on the plus icon, call this my theme. And what it does, you just gotta be careful, because when you save it, you click OK, it actually really quickly puts an underscore after all your spaces. And it doesn't show it here, but it's done in the file. And I've got my Blender console open, and you can see that where it saves it to. So writing preset to this location, and you can actually copy that and open that up in your system binder. So I can go back just a little bit, copy that, and I think I can see if the doubles. It's probably going to hate the fact that I've got these doubles here. But it's C users, and then app data roaming, Blender Foundation, and Blender in the version, and inside of scripts and presets. So I just have my roaming set here, and to get quickly into roaming, you can do the % sign. So % app data, %. This is a Windows thing, but that'll send you into your roaming folder, and roaming is where a lot of stuff is stored for your programs. So roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender, and then go to your version, and it's going to be in scripts and presets, and you've got interface themes, and there are your themes. So you can copy these and share them with each other. There was a call for content themes when Blender 2.8 was released, and so a ton of people have donated themes in a public forum on one of the Blender forum sites. But now you've got a place where you can come and store them and grab this and put it somewhere safe, so that when you delete Blender 3, it's not gone forever. Then you can just simply install it. Go find that XML file, and it will load up all your theme settings. And change theme back to the way you want. There you go, Omar.
If I'm not mistaken, that roundness setting in the preferences is not that old. It's relatively new. Can that be?
It's since Blender 2.8 something or 9 something. It's been around for a little while. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was new.
So the viewport has gotten a couple of upgrades. Your viewport shading in the 3D world space, you can add a vignette, so
Yeah.
it's not just a solid color background when you're looking at stuff in your viewport. You can add like a vignette where it changes color from an outside box section to an inside box section.
Yeah, you can
That's
choose
fairly
any
new.
color.
There's
Yeah,
always
but
things
it's
they're
all-
adding though.
I thought that was longer than the roundness. I thought the roundness was new. But maybe it's just for some things that there's now a roundness that you didn't used to be there.
Yeah, they probably have adjusted it over time.
I remember Pablo talking about it once, and it was new somewhere, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, maybe it is. I love playing with my interface themes. I do it all the time. You just waste hours playing with your interface.
Yeah.
Get nothing done.
Exactly, there's a name for that. behavior.
We're good at it.
Oh, masters.
So I'm going through now and changing all mine.
Yeah, you get totally lost, I'm telling you.
Yeah,
It's so much fun.
I'm going to stop there for now. Got other things
I
to
try
do.
to keep mine not terribly crazy, like because I share things and show how to do stuff in Blender. I kind of want it being so distracting. But I found that changing a couple of colors really helped me focus. I hated seeing the two different colors of orange when I was selecting things in Blender. So I've got blue and green for mine.
Yeah, so any more questions there? Is that a question I really need to do more work for start? I wonder how the original version of Blender looked.
Oh man.
We'll just download it.
It's available. You can go to
You can go
blender.org
and download
get
it.
Version 1 is there.
It requires a lot of work to set up if I remember correctly. Doesn't it, Spiky? It doesn't just self-install.
I don't have it. I will try, but I think it's probably a lot easier on Linux
Yeah.
than it is on Windows. I never install Blender versions. I just download them, unzip them, and it's ready.
Yeah.
I remember one of the early versions that I first used. It was difficult to even look at, let alone install it. I mean, it was just horrible.
Yeah, I was at 2.5er when I joined Blender.
I think my
That was
first
the
version
earliest
was
one I remember
probably
doing.
1.9 or something like that. But it was really difficult just to look at, let alone use it.
Oh, thanks, Sheila. Yeah, we'll have to. maybe Spiky can play and see if he can get Blender 1 working. That'd be cool to stream in one of our streams. Like, this is what it used to look like.
Yeah, kind of comparison with now, it's completely changed.
Yeah. Hey Parsec, we can show you shape keys, adding a shape key on another shape key. That'd be a good one for a stream. All of that to the to-do list. I've done that with my Bucky character, going from one mouth shape to another mouth shape.
Let's write it down.
Yeah, I'll write it down in our. I'll do it in the stream questions and answers.
So
for those of you who have questions in the stream questions and answers channel during the month, if you have questions, go ahead and add them there. And we add them in priority based on how they're received. And we'll typically come and answer them. If we don't see them, then we just pick ones that we've been helping with in the forums or ones we find important to share.
So I think we're about done, aren't we? Unless there's anything else. Just over the hour and a half now.
Oh, we're good in time.
Doing great on time. Hopefully Omar gets feeling better for next one. I know he was pretty sick this time.
Then we get to the 2 hours again.
Yeah. Hey, thanks guys.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave it there for this week, and we'll.
Thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah,
If you got people you're trying to get presents for,
exactly.
time to give a gift card. Or ask for a gift card if you're looking for some courses to take.
Yeah, we do the. We've got two gift cards on there. One's a $48 for a monthly subscription, or there's a $288 for a whole year gift card. So you can get the whole year on a gift card. Which, if anyone needs that, now's the time to ask your parents or your loved ones. Get me a CG Cookie subscription. Alright, thanks a lot everyone.
Okay, we'll see you all in the next one.
Cheers, bye.